Hi guys, Chris Parkin here from SIT and member of Rotary Camera Club. Just going to give you a quick walkthrough of 106 assignment 4, which is the Rotunda assignment, and yeah, just this is to sit alongside the PDF that you've got. This is done in intake for 2014, so you may find that the PDF changes at times, but this will at least give you an idea of your walkthrough and hopefully introduce you to some of the tools within Photoshop and show you some of the tricks and tips that you can pick up along the way. I'm going to do this in two parts. I'm going to show you how to do it according to the PDF, and then I'm going to show you a few other tricks that I've picked up along the way that should in theory make your life a little bit easier, but they're a little bit more complicated. So for those of you who are just starting out with Photoshop, stick to the simple, well, relatively simple version, and the rest of you, yeah, you're welcome to stick along, and we'll see how we go. Alright, I may actually end up splitting this into two videos because my voice will go out. I've had a chest infection recently. But alright, so we've dragged and dropped our image into Photoshop. Obviously we're running CS Creative Cloud, and the first thing we're going to do is get rid of this button lens mess here. It's probably a dust spot. What happens is you get dust sitting on your sensor, and instead of it obviously doesn't let the light through. You'll find that it gets worse excuse me, as you stop down your f-stop. So yeah, we'll get rid of this one. What we're going to use is the spot healing brush. You want to make sure that your brush is adjusted to a size that will pretty much get rid of it in one go. You'll notice that there's a couple of options: content aware, proximity match. They all work reasonably well. This one, in this case, content aware, hasn't worked as well as I would like it to. You've now got a blue patch, so let's go proximity match and see what that does. It's much better. We've still got a little bit of that cloud there, so we can get rid of it that way. You may take more than one go. If you click on it and you go, I don't like what it's done, Control, Alt and Z will allow you to step back through the you see sometimes it goes and grabs something really weird. It will allow you to step back and go through the what you've been up to. The other option is you can go to your histories, and the histories should be under here, and you can go back and click back to that point in time. I tend not to use histories that much, so if you're a histories fan, then that's cool. What I actually do most of my time is work non-destructively, which we're not doing for this part of the assignment. Right, so we've got that dot done, and the next one is we have this lens flare here. So what I'm doing when I'm navigating around, Control plus to zoom in, and hold down Shift brings up the hand and you can move around fairly easily. Square brackets allow you to change the size of your brush relatively quickly. The other option is you can change the size just by clicking up here and going through. So let's click on that. No, that's not done a good job because we've lost the line here and it's created a new line there. So Control Z and go back. Let's try content aware and see if that does any better. Not really, because we're still missing it. So Control Z. Okay, in this case we're going to use the clone tool. Zoom it to change the size of our brush, so it's going to just about cover everything. The other thing you want to check is the hardness. This one's a really hard brush at the moment. We don't want it too soft. I'll show you what happens on both of them so you can see. Right, Alt. I'm going to select a piece of the bar here so that we can get it to line up. Okay, so that's with a fairly soft brush. Very soft brush. You see how it's left a little bit of a ghost in the edge, which is not ideal. Let's try it the other way around with a hard brush. Make sure it lines up. That's not bad, except we've got a little bit of that edge of the circle there that you can see. So Control Z, undo the whole lot. We'll go with hardnesses that's somewhere between. Make sure we sample that point, line it up, and it's gone, and now you can't see that it's done. So whenever you're doing Photoshop work, that's your main priority, is to make it so that if somebody comes along and looks at the image, they should not be able to tell that you have done that edit. And if that's the case, fantastic. If not, try another tool. Okay, we're going to get rid of our wire. So we're going to grab the polygon lasso tool, and we're going to make sure our feathering is set, in this case, to 3. If you have your feathering set too high, I'll show you what happens, because it's worth knowing. Right, let's select our tool, and you see how the edges have gone rounded? This is the feathering taking effect. So to get rid of that, we can hit delete, and that'll bring up our fill tool, or you can go into the edit fill and content aware. This will come up with foreground color or background color, and we want content aware, and hit go, and that sits there thinking for a little while. Now this is what happens when our feathering's too feathered. You see how we can still see the ghost of the wire there. So let's get rid of that, and we need to redo the selection. So I'll type in 3 again, and this is when this tool becomes interesting. It's not going to select any tools there because I've got this set to negative, so that's unselect. You've got a couple of options. This one's start from a new selection, this one's add to selection, subtract from selection, or intersect, which is kind of back to your Venn diagram. So either of these two will do quite nicely for what we're doing. I'll just grab a selection tool here, double click, and that closes it up. Okay, so that's looking much better. Now let's go and do this properly. Edit fill, edit fill is there. Content aware, and let's see what it does. Not bad. Made a bit of a mess there. Let's just Control Z. Yeah, you see how it's kind of got rid of a little bit too much of that. So sometimes just even doing it again, the computer, because it regenerates the trace each time. That'll do for now. So Control D gives us our deselect. That will not do for now. That looks absolutely horrible. So I'm going to go back and redo. Control D, get our deselect, and often the solution is to just select much more tightly so that it's not replacing that section of the image. And this is the thing with Photoshop, and the first time you do this edit, what I recommend is you go through and just have a go, have a play. The second time that you do the edit, I then recommend that you go back and reapply everything and then see if you can make it look real. Photoshop is one of those things that takes a long time to master, and takes a long time to do each time, but it's worth spending that time and effort, and you can pick up a lot of different points, and every time you come back and look at it with new eyes, it does make life a little bit easier. So the next thing we're going to do is we've removed the wire. That's cool. We're going to make the sky a darker blue. Now if you're reading the current version of the PDF, that piece, when you're finished, it will probably look a bit patchy. It should be at the bottom of that page, not the top of it. So we're going to make the sky a darker blue. Having said that, I've managed to miss something. Sorry, we're on clone number 5, and we're going to clone stamp tool this out, all of this tree. So the biggest thing when you're clone stamping is you need to be aware of what your brush size is set at, and you need to be trying to sample areas that are similar in colour when you're covering things up, because if you sample something from, say, this side of the image, you'll note the skies are much darker blue, and if you do that, then it becomes very apparent that you've cloned over that. So you continually end up changing the size of your brush. That's going to be maybe about right. And the larger your brush, the less strokes you need to make, so the less you're going to make patterns. But having said that, the problem with a large brush is you can easily end up sampling pieces that you really didn't want to. and when you're coming to do fine edges, it becomes a nightmare. There's no way I can clean up and get rid of this tree with this feathering. I could drop the feathering down and increase the hardness, and that'll give me a huge nasty hard line there, which is not really what I want. So actually I'm going to get rid of this for starters. So you see how it's given me a really hard edge. Not brilliant. Control Z and undo. Soften that edge off a little bit, and it just makes that blend a little bit better. So once we've got all that rough pieces out the way, it's looking okay, we can then change the size of our brush and go in and do some much more fine tuning. And the smaller your brush and the more you zoom in, generally the better your work of this type of edge fine tuning can be. It doesn't always work that way, and you can end up finding that if you select the same point over and over again, you see how I've got a little pattern there. It means I need to be selecting out here, and you can go back and cover it up. And the other thing is my hardness is really quite hard, so you can see that edge, and it really is a painstaking task to do, but it's quite rewarding when you can go back and look at it and go, oh, I did all that changes, and you actually can't see it. So I'm going to skip across now because this is going to bore the living daylights out of you. So you see how I've got some pattern there and there's some circles there. You go back and change the size of your brush, change the hardness, and see if you can just clone down those edges. Now the other trick is you can reduce the opacity, so that changes the flow rate of the brush, and by putting on a half brush, part of the changing the flow rate and reducing the flow rate means that you don't get those circles quite as strongly. That's not perfect, but it will do for now. What was the other thing I was going to show you? Oh yeah, how to get these nice fluffy clouds over here, and not having them over here kind of makes life a little bit, looks a bit weird. So change our hardness, brush size is about right, change the opacity back to 100. I'm going to change the blend mode to lighten. So this is only going to take pieces of this image that are lighter and put them into our image, so we can use it to move the clouds around. Now, challenge with this is, and you have to be a little bit careful that you don't go and replicate the clouds too much, because our eyes pick up on repeating patterns. So if you can make the patterns so they don't look like they're repeating, it gives you a much better chance of tricking somebody into the fact that it's not been photoshopped. And you can see there's a bit of an edge there, so I'll clone this side of that off. There we go. And that was obviously the silhouette of the tree. Okay, so we've done that cloning. We're going to change the colour of the sky a little bit. So the next thing on here is, got rid of the clone stamp, sorry. So we're going to select our colour range. So select colour range and select the tree. Again, you've got the option of starting from scratch every time you click it, or adding to it. And in this case, we want to add to it. We want to make sure that we've selected down here. But you see, we've now selected some of the stairs because of the white. That's okay. I'll show you a trick to deselect that, but still give us that nice selection. Okay, click OK. You can see, yeah, that's not looking too bad. We've got this area down here, this area here that is selected when it shouldn't be. But that's okay. Remember our polygon lasso tool, and we had the option of exclude. You can use that and go through and draw a line around everything that's got those marching ants, and that deselects them. So now we've got a nice selection there. It's looking pretty close to good. Feathering's only 3 pixels. Hopefully that will do. If it needs to be feathered more, you can click on Refine Edge, and there's a feather option and there's a smooth option, which can be quite good as well. And you can also shift the edge in and out, but I'll show you why we use that one in a little bit. Okay, so there's our selection, and we're going to go and image adjustments and curves, image adjustments and curves, and we can darken the sky down a little bit. Now you see, by darkening the sky down we increase the contrast, which means that we've made a mess of some of our cloning. You can actually see where we've cloned it. Not too much of a worry at the moment, because we're going to do one more step. Let's see how that works as well. You can actually reduce the contrast, but if you do that you end up reducing the bright whites, and while you don't want your whites to be blown out, that is over this end, right up to this end of the histogram, you still want your whites to be white, otherwise the image looks flat and horrible. So we've done that. Now we're going to go up to the top of the page and go filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and you'll get this little pop-up to show you what's happening. Now you notice that the edge of these trees are starting to get blurred as well. The problem with that is that if we crank up the Gaussian blur, you end up with color spill, and that starts looking horrible. So there is a way around this. I'm going to cancel. You remember how we said refine edge? We can shift the edge in, and we can smooth that edge out a little bit and feather it a little more, and that feathers our selection. Now when we go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, let's see what happens. Okay, so it's not blurring the edge of our image anymore, which is much better. Okay, so that's softened some of this. Control D to deselect, and on the second round through I'd go through and redo this and just see if you can, excuse me, I need to cough, see if you can sort out some of the cloning. But as I said, I'll show you another way of doing this so it's a little bit neater. Okay. Right, where are we up to? Okay, so we're going to reposition the selection and show you how to use that polygon lasso tool, and we're going to cut out this tree and bench. Alright, on our polygon lasso tool, make sure we're selecting add or new, because otherwise if we've got the inverse, it's not going to behave itself, and we need to change the feathering to 10. Okay, now the neater you can cut this out, generally the better you're going to end up finding your final images. Certainly the less that you have to clone when you do the next step. So you don't cut off any leaves. And double click and it will finish and close up that loop. Okay, so we've got that. Next thing we're going to do is layer, new, and cut. Oops, layer, new, and we're going to vote via cut. Now if you do via copy it doesn't behave itself quite the same. We'll do that in the next one. Okay, edit, transform, and flip horizontal. The other option is shortcut Control T, and that gives us our selection box. And flip horizontal, which turns it around, and it already allows us to move. Now you note my background's set to black at the moment, which means that we've got a black piece that's left. Okay, so we need to tip this and arrange it so that it basically looks as real as possible. It's pretty close and pretty good, but there's a few things we're going to have to sort out by the end of this. One is we've got halos around here, halos around the edge of this tree, and we're covering the rubbish bin. So how do we get rid of that? Well, lots of ways of doing it. One is to grab the eraser and simply go through, make sure you've selected the layer that we're working on, and make sure your hardness is slightly higher, and you can go through and just chop it off, zoom in, and just Control plus again, and keep going until you get rid of it. Well, help if I get my opacity up. So you can go through and keep chopping bits off. Now the problem with chopping bits off like that is if I happen to go like that, and oh damn, I've chopped too much off. Later on, if I get to that point and realize, ugh, I shouldn't have chopped that off, you can't do anything about it. So I'm going to show you a little trick. It's something we cover a little bit later, but it does make life a lot easier. It's called layer masks. I'm going to reveal all the layer, and what this allows us to do is grab a paintbrush, and instead of editing with our eraser tool, we can grab a paintbrush, and just as we were painting normally, you can paint away the edge of what you're working on. And you see how I've made a mess of this. If I come back later, as long as I select the layer mask and select my paint, white reveals, black conceals, you can go back over and fix up any of the bits that you've made an error on. Now if you stick around for doing the second part of this tutorial, and you're really keen, then I'll show you a few more tricks and tips with using those layer masks. But yeah, it's really useful. You can get in fine detail, zoom in, and we can actually paint back in parts of that landscape that we previously got rid of, change back and forth between between revealing the background and hiding it, and basically go back and include all of that data that we've chopped out to make it look like it's the original image, and we've just plonked that tree there and nobody can tell the difference. So if somebody comes along and goes, oh, I know that place, where did that tree go? I must have chopped it out. And you see how this feathering that we had set to 10 has given us a halo around the tree. Make sure we get rid of that. And this takes a lot of fine-tuning, which is the advantage of using that layer mask, because it allows you to do that. Come back when you get sick of it, go back and work on something else. Oops, my brush is set the wrong way. And so yeah, keep going. Get rid of this piece so we can see through the top of the rubbish bin. And it's time and effort just making sure that it looks real. Now this rubbish bin, if you're going to be really picky, you'd mask out every single bit of it. I'm not going to do that on this one anyway. I'll show you another trick for that one later. But okay, gives you an idea of how to do that piece. Next thing we need to do is to sort out this pavilion. Okay, so we're going to cut out the pavilion and cut it as close to the middle as you can. I've cut out a little bit too much of that tree, so I'm going to have to clone in some of the pavilion, more of the pavilion than I would need it to. I'm going to let's see what this feather of 10 does. I think it actually should have dropped my feathering down. Let's find out. Make sure you've got your background layer selected. If you've got this layer selected and you try and cut, there's nothing to cut out. Excuse me. So layer, new via copy this time, Control T, and flip horizontal. Okay, and you need to line it up with its surroundings. So that's going to take a little bit of tweaking. You'll note that the bottom of if you get the middle of it lined up, it works, but the bottom doesn't. One of the options you've got is warp, and you should be able to drag that corner and line down so it all lines up nicely. Of course, you don't want to warp it too much, because otherwise it makes a mess of it. So I'm actually going to go back and redo this cutout, because I've cut off too much of the tree and I want this. So let me show you how we can do that. We're going to drag and drop this Rotunda image back in and zoom out So we've got a new layer basically of that rotunda image. So in this case I'm going to cut much more tightly around the tree. And my feathering was set too high the first time. So let's drop that feathering down to 3. It's not 33. There we go. And Control C is the other way of doing it, and Control V gives us our thing posted back in, and it's just dumped it into a new layer for us. Control T gives us our transform, and we can flip horizontal and start again with just a little bit less work to do. So sometimes this is one of the reasons why I want to show you how to do it non-destructively, because had we done that cutout non-destructively, I wouldn't have had to go through that little tweak to get things sorted. I'm going to grab the skew tool this time because that keeps things a little bit more in proportion. There we go. And okay. Oops, I chopped off the corner. Yeah, that was dumb. So I'm going to have to go and clone that back out too. Right, let's carry on and show you how to fix it in the next version. Okay, so we flip that, and we're going to use the clone stamp tool. So if you clone onto a new layer, obviously that's too big, so we'll use our shortcut keys to drop it down. Press Alt, and that allows you to select a new point. Our blend mode is on lighten, so we need to change it back to normal, otherwise we'll just brighten parts of images and not darken the other bits. And you just carry on going through and cloning the pieces out. In this case I'm going to have to reduce my size of my brush and increase the hardness a little bit. Zoom in a little bit more, and it's just a case of going through, and that brush needs to be even smaller. Going through and fine-tuning your bits and pieces until you've got all the pieces sorted, and get rid of all that black mark. In this case I'll need to increase my brush size again, and you're perpetually playing with your brush size to do the tasks that you want. Go with a slightly harder brush. There we go, and that should allow me to get up close to that pillar without actually covering it up. And you see I've made a little bit of a mistake there, so Control Z. Copy this one across here instead, and copy that. There we go. So yeah, fine-tuning, fine detail, and just continually working your way through and trying to make sure you sample something that doesn't create that error. Make sure things are, particularly like particle boards and weatherboards and anything that's got a pattern in it, are in line. And have fun with it. It will take a while, and don't be surprised if you end up finding that you want to go back and redo something. That's perfectly normal. So one of the other options is, because our history only saves back about 20 times, you go File, Save As, and save the image a couple more times. Right. So I'll let you continue cleaning that up. You obviously need to clone in this area here. The same thing goes. Nice large brush tools, or brush samples, will tend to reduce the amount of cloning that or the number of times that you have to clone, but you don't want to create too big a pattern with the work that you do. If you do, then the human eye picks it up. So it's a mixture of using the small tools and the big tools, and just keep playing with it. So, unfortunately watching. It makes it very boring watching. Right, so um, okay, what else do we need to cover? We needed to cover the dodge and burn tool. So make sure you've got the background selected. If you don't have the background selected, then this is going to not affect the brush that you need. And it's dodge and burn. So dodge, in the darkroom in the olden days, you would get a piece of cardboard or your hand, and you would block the light from hitting the paper. And of course, when you're developing a negative, that means that the area would become brighter. If you burnt in an area, that means that you just allow more light to fall on that area, and you can see the hand shape. You'd actually leave a hand or a cutout and allow that light to go through your hand. Or you'd use a mask and literally cut it out with a scalpel and knife, and yeah, it takes an awful lot longer to do than it does in Photoshop, trust me. So we want our exposure, and we're going to change the highlights, not the midtones, and just brighten it up a little bit. Okay, it's a nice big brush. You're not brightening it up too much. If you take it up more than that, you're probably going to, well, I'll show you what happens. It makes it glow, and it makes it look like it's brighter than the sunlight. So you still want it visible that you've done the change, but you don't want to make it so it's absolutely humongous. Okay, that is no means finished, but at least shows you how to use some of the tools. One other thing to say with Photoshop, cause and effect. If you have done something like remove a wire, if that wire casts a shadow, make sure you remove the shadow. If you can. If you remove trees, remove the tree shadows. Otherwise, those little telltales are left. Right, so hopefully you found this useful and explored a whole pile of new tools. I will come back and start doing the next video of how I do this non-destructively and give you a little bit more editing time. But I mean, the key thing for this is you're discovering a whole pile of new tools that you haven't used before. So that's cool. Hopefully you've enjoyed it and haven't had to put up with me rambling for far too long. Alright, catch you later.